We will do a live video on public speaking skills today, public speaking skills in English, presentation skills for all the non-native speakers who need to present a lot at work, who need to present in the English language, who need to present to the board of directors, to their clients. And when I say present, it doesn't really mean you need to deliver an hour-long presentation. Very often it's a Zoom call where you have to explain something to one person. When I say presentations, I do not always mean long presentations. And it doesn't even mean you have to prepare slides or you will have the slides. A presentation can mean a Zoom call, as you said before, and you need to explain something to a client. You need to present the updates of what you have done in the application, let's say if you're a technical team, or maybe you just need to clarify a few details with a client just to make sure you're on the same page. Maybe it's a job interview, right? Maybe you need to send a message to your team. Right now, everyone is working remotely. So many people are working together with other international teams that are often on different continents. And very often we need to communicate the same idea to different teams who are spread across the globe, right? There is a team in Latin America, there is a team in the US, there is a team in Russia, there is a team in Asia, and everybody needs to get the same message. So the person who is responsible for communicating that message needs public speaking skills as well, presentation skills. So when we talk about public speaking in business, in the English language, we do not mean that a person has to necessarily be on stage, have slides behind their back, and present something utterly complex or long or new. It doesn't really mean that. Every time you go to a job interview, you need presentation skills. Every time you need to present a report to the board of directors, you need presentation skills. So public speaking skills is pretty much the same. Every time you need to present your idea to the management and get the approval of the budget maybe or of the next steps, you need presentation skills. Every time you need to jump on a sales call with a client, again, we're talking about presentation skills. And it doesn't really matter if you do presentations remotely now. It doesn't really matter if your camera is on or off, even if it's just a phone call. It is more difficult when it's just a phone call and you do not see a person. It's more difficult for sure. But again, we're talking about presentation skills. I want this video to be practical, so I'm not going to be sharing theoretical knowledge about how to do better presentations. I want to share a few exercises that I do myself, that we do with people who practice public speaking skills with me when we do the course, and with all those people who will take the course in the near future. Public speaking skills, or any presentation is not really about the slides and is not about the information that you're about to deliver, because I have seen beautifully written texts, a lot of them. I have seen beautiful slides and just beautiful presentations. And I have seen so many times how people cannot deliver these beautiful texts, these beautifully written texts. They just can't deliver them. Presentations start with your inner state. Everybody wants to present with confidence. And everybody who joins the course, every time they tell me, I have so much experience presenting in my first language, what I lack is confidence in English. So I want to present with as much confidence as I have when I present in my first language, right? It starts with your inner state, for sure. We cannot talk about a successful presentation, we cannot talk about a good presentation if you can't manage your inner state. When I say inner state, and when I say you gotta manage your inner state, I mean that you can steer conversations. And that is so much more important than delivering the text you have prepared at home. Steering conversations is the most important skill today, because public speaking skills and presentation skills are not static. We're not talking about delivering a monologue. We're not talking about delivering a speech you have prepared and learned. We're talking about continuous interaction with people. There will be questions, people will be interrupting you, there will be technical issues, there will be connection issues like just we had right now. Something will happen, and most of the time people are not ready for whatever can happen or whatever might happen. When something happens that they didn't expect to happen, they simply don't know how to react. And that's the most important thing that you gotta learn. When you steer a conversation, you choose the direction in which it's going. Steering conversation starts from within. It starts from your inner state. If you're confident you can do that, you simply go ahead and do it. Where does this confidence come from? First of all, of course, it comes from a lot of practice, because confidence always comes from competence. If you have done it a million times, There is no problem. You can do it one more time. Seriously, no problem at all. You can do it anytime, in any conditions, anywhere, okay? And when you learn to deliver a beautifully written text in beautiful English, it's one story. When you learn to be in front of a group of people and answer their spontaneous questions, always knowing what to say, how to reply to questions, how to tell a joke, how to build this rapport with people, that's a completely different skill. This is what I mean when I say steering. Steering is comfortable for a person who is ready for a spontaneous conversation, who is ready to go off route. And you got to be ready for that. How do you practice this inner state? If it comes from competence, if confidence comes from competence, well, logically, you're going to build enough positive experience. And I want to share a few exercises that I do to build that positive experience that helps me tremendously when I need to speak in front of people. I never write down every word of my presentation, because if I write down every word of my presentation, the only way I can successfully deliver this text is if I learn every word by heart. And I know that if I start learning every word by heart, I'm going to fail. Seriously, I never do that. I only do that, and I only did it actually in the past when I had to present in front of a lot of people, in front of a lot of investors on stage in London, Barcelona, Stockholm, where I was limited in time. I only had 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, they just kick speakers out. They say, your time is out, that's it, we're done. And you can't say anything else. So I had to write down every word of my presentation, and I had to practice saying my text out loud, just to make sure that I am on time. Because very often it seems to us that we have spoken for 2 minutes only, but in reality we have been speaking for 10 minutes already. Very often we lose track of time. And when you practice continuously, and when you time yourself continuously, you get the idea of how long it takes you to deliver your ideas, how long it takes you to explain something. It might seem to you that you have said practically nothing. You've been speaking for a minute maybe, but other people might find your presentation tiring because it's been 10 minutes already and they're not getting it still. After 10 minutes of talking and listening, after 10 minutes of listening, actually, they still don't know, they still don't have a clue. So timing yourself is another amazing exercise that I actually don't have on my list, but it works wonders. Time yourself when you talk to yourself, when you practice your presentations. I have a podcast that is called How to Talk to Yourself and how to use this exercise of talking to yourself. It might seem stupid because you're not receiving any feedback. It might seem useless and pointless as well because it feels like you're talking to the wall, but it works, and I'm sharing strategies, step-by-step strategies of how you can make this exercise work for yourself to practice your fluency, to practice confidence, and to practice managing your inner state. Because if you're only comfortable speaking English in front of people you know, or when no one is around, or only in your head, this confidence is never going to come to you, because you want to learn to be comfortable and confident when other people are around. And it doesn't really matter who's watching, who is looking, who is listening. It doesn't really matter. Most often we feel suddenly shy and reluctant to say anything, and we feel anxious when new people are around because we're afraid of their judgment, and we don't really know what they're going to think about us, right, when they hear us speak, because we're not very comfortable with ourselves. As soon as you become comfortable listening to your own voice, as soon as you become comfortable seeing yourself on camera, it's all going to go away, because it doesn't really matter. It's you. It's still you. And you cannot control how other people see you. They will see what they can see. You absolutely cannot control what other people think of you, how they see you, how they hear you. It's impossible. So it just makes no sense to waste your time trying to control that. Okay, coming back to the exercises. Exercise number 1, record yourself with an intention to time yourself. How long does it take you to explain to people what your job is? A very simple exercise. Explain to yourself what you do at work and time yourself. How long does it take you? So that you get an idea. The next exercise is, surprisingly, writing. There's just no chance you can do public speaking if you don't know how to write. Public speaking and presentation skills. Start with writing. Writing is an amazing exercise to practice clarity. The most common feedback from native speaking managers, let's say, from people who manage large organizations, the most common feedback from investors and from those people who have to listen to a lot of presentations is that many pitches and many presentations they have heard and many sales calls they've been on lack structure. People talk, their English is pretty strong and it's decent, but there is no structure. They say something like, we hear what you say, but we struggle to understand what you really mean. You know, they're listening to English, but they can't really figure out what this is all about. If you present an idea and people are not getting it, it means you can work more on the structure of your speech, of your presentation, right? If you need to explain to somebody why this needs to be done and why that is something we will never do and we should not do that in our organization, and people don't agree with you, it means they don't hear you, and it means you need to think of finding better ways to explain to them in their language what you mean and whatever you're trying to communicate. Lack of structure, this is the most common feedback. Writing is an amazing exercise that helps you practice structure. Again, let's come back to this very simple exercise. Explain to other people what you do at work. Write it down. Write a paragraph that will explain to people what you do every day at work. Many people introduce it themselves by going like, I'm a project manager. So what? What does it mean? What do you do? In which company? In which industry? Or I'm in marketing. Okay. You need to give people something to continue the conversation. If you say something like, I'm a project manager, with a kind of intonation that shows people that you're really reluctant to talk and you don't really want to develop this conversation, that's the end of the conversation. You want to kick the conversation started. You don't want to end the conversation when you introduce yourself. But many people, maybe they don't realize they're doing that, but when they introduce themselves in a way that actually ends the conversation. Instead, you want to kick it started. You want to keep going. You want to invite people to ask questions, right? You want to keep the ball rolling. And if you don't do that, the conversation ends very logically. A presentation is never a monologue. It is supposed to be a conversation, at least in my world. My best presentations have been conversations, always. You say something, people have questions because they're interested in whatever you're saying. So they ask questions and you end up having a conversation. It feels like you're talking to people instead of talking at people. It's a big difference. So writing is something that helps you structure your speech. Write down this paragraph. What do you do at work? Does it make sense to you? Have someone else read this paragraph. Does it make sense to them? And whenever you need to explain something at work, you don't really need to make this up. Simply go to work and whatever happens during the day, take anything, any task that you're doing, any meeting, any phone call, and find something that was not clear today. For example, you were talking to a colleague and they didn't understand why the budget differs from what you discussed yesterday. Explain it, but in the written form. And you can start just like that. Take a pen. It's very important that you don't type with your thumb, right? You really take a pen, you really take a piece of paper and you write it down with your hand. We had to reduce the budget because, right? Or we had to increase the budget because, and write down your reasoning. And you will see if it even makes sense to you when you read it out loud, when you read it to yourself. And maybe it will become very obvious to you why the other person couldn't agree with you, or why the other person was struggling understanding you. Anything that happened today, think about it. Whatever you couldn't explain, whatever you didn't understand, and write it down. If you're more advanced and you want to practice explaining more complex ideas, you can play with more complex notions. Explain to yourself what teamwork is to you. Explain to yourself what motivation is to you. Explain to yourself what work-life balance means to you. Write it down. Motivation to me is, and see if you come up with a paragraph. If you can't write down your ideas, then we cannot talk about successful presentations, because successful presentations mean, I don't even want to use the word successful presentations, but a good presentation is a clear presentation. If you explain your ideas and people understand your ideas, how do you know if they understand? If they understand it, they can repeat it and they can go tell someone else. How do you know it's a bad joke? If you tell a joke and right after you've told a joke, you need to explain your joke so that people laugh, it's a bad joke. It means you didn't do a good job telling a joke. If it's a good joke and you delivered it well, people laugh. So the same here. If you explain something and people don't get it and they can't explain it and they don't do what you want them to do, they didn't get it. A good presentation is a clear presentation. In order to deliver a clear presentation, you need to know how you're going to begin. You need to see the structure. What are the main bullet points in the body of your presentation? What are the main aspects that you will talk about? And you need to know how you're going to finish it. Because most people finish their presentations by saying, "That's it, thank you very much." And it's not very interesting. Or they simply don't know how to finish and they keep talking and they keep talking and they keep talking, trying to find the words to finish their presentation, and it doesn't work either. Write everything down. Even write down the synopsis of your presentation. My coach used to tell me, "Natalia, if you can't put it in 10 words, there's no speech." So my task would always be to write down the synopsis or to write down the summary, a very short summary of my talk, and fit it within 10 words. Can I say it in 10 words? So that it is clear to everybody else what my presentation is about, and to myself as well. If I can't do it, I need to work harder, I need to practice more. The next exercise can help you be ready anytime, because that's another important skill that we want to practice if we want to learn to steer conversations and if we want to learn to feel comfortable in spontaneous conversations. That is only possible when you are ready anytime. So you don't really need to meditate for an hour, to get ready for a presentation. You just can jump in anytime. If somebody tells you we're having a phone call with our American clients in 5 minutes, can you join? You say, yeah, sure, no problem. You always can jump in and you're always ready. That's the skill you want to practice. This is why, again, I keep saying that presentation skills start with your inner state. Writing definitely helps as well. Just remember that whenever you have written something down, you don't leave it there like that. You don't leave it in the written form. What you have to do after you've written it down and after you have edited it, because you will have to edit your thought process, you need to say it out loud. And you need to say it out loud as if you really mean it, right? That's very important because you're practicing speaking skills. You're using writing to practice your speaking skills, but it's important that you don't keep it there on paper. You say it out loud. Another amazing exercise that I find helpful is you play interviews. You can find Vogue interviews on YouTube. The interviews are called 73 Questions with, and the name of the celebrity, tons of different celebrities are being interviewed by one person, and they ask them 73 questions. Well, it's a show and they want to make it look like all the questions are random, but in reality, we know that they were prepared. However, the show is fascinating because people are asked questions one after another, and you can learn so much by listening to how they reply to these questions, because they reply to questions fast, spontaneously, and they don't think much about it. They simply move on to the next question. So you don't need to answer 79 questions yourself. What you can do is you can just take 5 questions from that show, from any show, listen to examples, and answer them yourself. And again, time yourself. How long does it take you to answer the question? We can try right now. For example, one thing that you can't live without. What's the first thing on your mind? What's one thing that you cannot live without? See if you can get an answer. Another question, what is the last thing you Googled today? Another question, what's your favorite meal for breakfast? How fast can you come up with a response? And how fast can you say it out loud? Because if you have come up with a response and it's only in your head, but you have never vocalized it and you don't even try to vocalize it, it all does not work. Because we all speak beautiful English in our head, right? And we have an idea that we understand. But it's very important to say it out loud and to give feedback to yourself, as well as collect feedback from other people. Does it make sense to other people when you talk? And how do you make other people feel? That's probably the most important thing that we practice in the public speaking course. Know what you say, and not how correct whatever you're saying is, but how do you make other people feel when you talk? That is what charisma is to me. How other people feel when you're around. I have questions here. What if in the middle of your message or presentation you're running out of words and there is a silence? Very simple. Look, why do you think that you have to be perfect and that you're not allowed to run out of words? If I find myself in a situation where I run out of words, I say one of these phrases, and actually I have an Instagram post which is called What to Do When You're Stuck, and I shared those phrases that I use myself in that post. If I feel that I'm out of words, and again, I can be out of words for any reason. Maybe I really forgot what I wanted to talk about. Maybe I lost my train of thought. Maybe I forgot an English word. Maybe I got distracted by a phone call or by a message or whatever. The reason can be just whatever, any reason. You simply pause and you say something like, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant to say. Let me start over. And that's it. And while you're saying it, you're giving yourself time to think whatever you're going to say next. And you're allowing yourself to remember whatever you wanted to say, or to think how you can say it differently, or maybe to structure the whole message differently. These phrases can sound differently. You can say something like, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I hope it's going to come back to me very soon, right? Or I'm afraid I forgot the word. I hope I will remember it very soon. Why not? Or just forget what I said 5 minutes ago. I'm going to start over. Or this is not really what I meant to say. Let me phrase it differently. Let me put it differently. And that's it. And you say it. Because nobody said that it's not allowed. Nobody said that you cannot suddenly forget what you wanted to say. Why not? But if you suddenly start feeling less worthy or more nervous, or if you start feeling shame, or like you start feeling like everybody's judging you immediately for the fact that you have forgotten one word, yes, you're creating a lot of stress for yourself, and you're the only person in the room who feels all that stress. Other people can wait. Look, it might seem to you only, if you have forgotten a word, it seems to you that it's been an eternity. It's been 10 minutes, right? While in reality, it's probably been 5 seconds. So you're hanging there, or you're frozen for 5 seconds because you're trying to remember the word. People can wait 5 seconds. I mean, it's not a big deal. So as long as you react normally and naturally, and you tell them, look, give me 5 seconds, it's going to come back to me. Why not? Intonation is crucial. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And again, this is something you want to practice. What I'm doing right now, and why do you think I'm doing this video? When you ask this question, it's good. You asked the question, so you gave me a chance to practice those phrases one more time. What would I do? What would I say? And I'm not practicing the word order. I'm not practicing the English words that are supposed to be perfect and correct. I'm not practicing my pronunciation. I'm practicing the skill of coming up with answers to spontaneous questions, and I'm practicing my intonations so that they don't sound, and I don't sound apologetic for forgetting something. I don't sound stressed, and I don't sound confused. I sound okay, and I sound like I want to continue the conversation, and I'm going to continue my speech. Just give me a few seconds. If you don't allow yourself to make mistakes, you probably expect that other people will judge you for every mistake as well. But if you have managed to build good rapport, and if you have good relationships with people you're presenting to, there's no problem in saying something like, let me start over. It's not what I wanted to say. Why not? As long as it's genuine and honest and sincere. I was going to talk about another exercise, and another exercise was telling stories. Many people go through life without editing it. So you have to, and you want to learn editing your experience. When people ask you, how's your weekend? Can you reply with a story? Most people say something like, oh, what did I even do this weekend? When was the weekend? They simply don't think about it that much, and they don't pay attention to that, and they can't tell a story of what happened to them. They can't, and not because they can't, but because they have never practiced explaining their experiences. Maybe you spent all weekend at home, but you watched something, maybe a movie or a documentary, or you spoke to someone, or you read something that made you think about something, or that gave you an insight into something, and that was so amazing and fascinating and so compelling. It doesn't mean that you have to tell a story of how you went places, right? Or how you have been to that amazing mountain. No, it can be anything, any experience that happened inside you, even at home. But think, can you talk about it? Can you verbalize it? Can you vocalize it? Can you explain this to other people? What shook you emotionally? What struck you? What surprised you? Can you talk about it? Most people have no idea. They can only talk about business reports using business jargon, and that's it. But in business, we want to connect to people on a human level in the first place. So can you connect with people, and can you explain what surprised you? What insight did this movie give you? Or what did you feel when you watched that cartoon with your kids? How did it make you feel? Or what did you realize? Think about that. A story, right? It can be a story about how you spent a weekend. It can be a story about your childhood memories. It can be a story about anything. My point here is you gotta be attentive. So teach yourself to be very attentive as you go through life, because anything can give us insights into many things. A lamp, I don't know, good weather, bad weather, a car passing by, a person you saw in a supermarket, anything, right? Anything can bring back good memories, anything can bring back bad memories, anything can remind you of your childhood experience. And the trick is, the exercise is to try to tell a story. Well, not to try, tell a story. Explain what you have just seen through a story. Why does this mean so much to you? Why did you pay attention here? Why do you like this color? You know, what's the story behind it? You will be practicing spontaneous conversations because there is a question, even if it's a question that you're asking yourself. But anybody might ask this question. And if you learn how to do this, if you can do this, this is just amazing for all your conversations, because you will always have something to say in a conversation. And you will not have these moments when you feel like you want to say something and you have so much going on within you because this brought back so many good memories, and you suddenly realize something that you feel the need to share with people, but you can't. You can't share it. You can't express it. You're lacking words. You can't find the right structure. Not because your English is bad, but simply because you have never practiced it. Trust me, many people can deliver very good presentations without really being advanced or proficient. They simply practice a lot. And when you practice a lot, upgrading your English skills is easy. The most important thing is that you see the structure of your message and you understand how other people receive your message. Most people simply learn their text by heart and they don't care if their message has been received. All they care about is that they look professional, they look confident, they look beautiful when they present, they finish and they go. And that's it. And they say, I delivered a presentation today. But they don't really check understanding. It's way, way more important if people actually got your message and if your message was actually received than if you delivered it today. This exercise will give you so many insights. And if you start telling stories first to yourself, then you should dare to tell stories to other people. You will always have this experience when people will want to share a story back. And that's the point. That's the whole point of telling a story. Storytelling in business is not for sales. We don't tell stories in business to sell. We don't tell stories to convince somebody to do something. We don't tell stories to force somebody or to make somebody do something. No, we tell a story to hear a story back. That's it. Because this is what helps us build relationships. And you will also find that it's not so easy to tell a story about your childhood memories or about that work experience or any story that would explain something complicated. In this case, you need to sit down and write down the story. Again, writing, so that you can practice clarity. Are you clear enough, even to yourself? Does this passage that you have written down make sense to you in the first place? Because if it doesn't make sense to you, how are other people supposed to understand you? Practice telling stories and just make sure that they are short. Ideally, you want to learn to tell your stories within 2 minutes. 2 minutes max. If it's longer than 2 minutes, then, and if it's a new person, if it's a new story, it might be tiring. So practice telling short stories, less than 2 minutes. And keep looking for them because they're everywhere. You don't really need to come up with stories. You don't really need to think about stories to say. You simply go through life and you pay attention to things and they will come to you. Everybody has a story. All you need to do is you need to learn to express them, to articulate them, and to say them, out loud to think out loud, pretty much. Yeah, thinking out loud is also a good skill. And when you learn to say them in a clearer way, people will always give you feedback and you will always hear a story back. And if you hear a story back, that means you've told a good story. That means it's good. Another amazing exercise that I do all the time, you can see it on my Instagram account as well, reading out loud. This is the exercise that helps you improve your pronunciation, your diction, your rhythm, your intonations. Because when you read something out loud, you need to understand what you're reading. If you read something and you do not understand whatever you're reading, other people will also not hear the message and other people will not understand whatever you're saying. So this is a good exercise to train this ability to deliver the meaning, not the words. Because when you read out loud, you can think of yourself as, you're privileged. You see the text. Other people who are listening to how you read out loud, they do not see the text. When you present anything in business, you are looking at your slides and you have seen those slides many times before. Maybe you have even made them yourself. You have seen the text of your presentation many, many times before you started presenting because you practiced. And other people who are listening to you, they didn't see the slides, they didn't see the text, they didn't hear you practice. All they rely on is your voice and your presentation. So if we cannot read the text that we have prepared in such a way that people get it, we need to practice more. The most common reason why people who are listening to how you even read the presentation, there's nothing wrong with reading it if you can read. But the most common feedback that people give who do not understand is that they can't understand where one sentence ends and another sentence begins. Reasons are very simple. Your pronunciation is not clear. This is why people can't really understand whatever you're saying. You're stressing the wrong words and you're not pausing in the right places and you go up and down incorrectly. Pretty much these 4 things. If you learn how to do that and we practice rhythm, inflections, intonation, stress, we practice all that in the public speaking course. If you learn how to do this, I call it chunking, these 4 elements, you dramatically will improve your delivery. Because what I spoke about before is the structure, right? You need to see the structure of the message and you need to understand how you want to deliver it. First you structure it, then you deliver it. Every presentation consists of these 2 parts. You need to know what you're going to say and you need to know how you want to say it and you want to practice saying it. So delivery is also important. And if you want to practice better delivery, you want to read out loud a lot. Not simply Instagram posts, not articles on the internet. You want to read fiction books, because this is how you will improve your vocabulary. This is how you will learn to understand people better, because most fiction books are about people and their relationships, not about business reports. And you're going to improve your pronunciation and your diction dramatically, trust me. And the final exercise is supposed to help you begin and end your presentations. You can practice it when you tell stories as well, because when you tell a story, you have to start it somehow. Do not tell a story with, I'm going to tell you a story. Don't do that. Simply start telling a story. I will share 2 opening phrases that I like myself and use them a lot. They're very simple. Phrase number 1 is, I remember, and then whatever. I remember back in 2005, you're already waiting for the story, right? You're waiting for what happened in 2005. Or I remember back when I was a kid. Or I remember when I just moved to Moscow. That's a good line for starting a story. A really good line. Very simple, works all the time, 100%. The second line that I like, it's a word actually. It's the word imagine. If you want to travel back, because a story is usually something that happened in the past. If you want to travel back to 5 years ago, you can say something like, imagine we're in Moscow in 2005, or imagine we're in New York, or imagine it's summer and we're all 9 years old, right? And then you can tell a story of your real experience of something that really happened to you when you were 9. Very simple opening phrases, and if you really don't know how to start a story, start with those. Well, just try and see how that works. I hope they're going to be helpful. And at the end of the story, or at the end of every presentation, what you want to do is you always want to come back to how you started, because at the beginning of your presentation, you're supposed to give people the reason to listen to your presentation. You're not supposed to start with a long introduction that nobody really wants and nobody expects you to give. you can always cut the introduction. If you feel that you need to introduce your presentation or your idea, it's okay. Sit down, write it down. I always give this tip: write down your introduction, and maybe write down the text of your entire story or your entire presentation if you don't feel confident you can do it, and then simply cut the introduction. Because in 99% of the cases, people who have written down the entire story, when they cut the first paragraph, which is their introduction, they see and they find out that the story didn't suffer. The message is still there, even if you remove the introduction. Most of the time, they're not necessary. You want to start with your main idea, and this is why you need to practice writing. Can you write down your idea in 10 words? Can you fit it in one sentence? If you can, good, start with it. And at the end of your presentation, you want to repeat the main idea. Again, I'm going to just share 2 lines that I use to finish my stories. They also work. And just practice using them for now. We tell a story to make a point. We don't tell just of course we can tell just a funny story, right? But in business, when we have deeper conversations with people, we share stories to make a point and to explain something meaningful to us, to explain something new or something complicated. This is why it only makes sense to finish your story with a line like, so the lesson here is, good line. So the lesson here is that you got to prepare. Or another line that I like is, so what I learned is, if you tell a story of a failure maybe, or of some negative experience that you've had in your life that taught you something or that helped you to learn something, why not? You can say, so my lesson here was, and say what you have learned, right? You can say something like, so the moral of the story is, or the point is, or what I've learned is, but that will prepare your listeners for closure. They will hear that, okay, I gotta be attentive, that's the end of the story, and you will have a nice structure as well. As soon as you say something like, so the point here is, and you gotta pause here for a short while, you're preparing people to hear that message, and people are ready to hear it. And then you have to say it, and it has to be crystal clear. Because if you say something like, so the point here is, and instead of one clear sentence, you read 3 paragraphs of nonsense, and it's not structured nonsense, then people are going to be, maybe they will be patient and they will be waiting for it, but at some point they will lose patience. And if you do it to people all the time, you prepare them for a clear message, and then you lie to them. And you do something that, like, you don't do what you promised, right? You don't give them a clear message, and instead you give them a rambling presentation or another 10 minutes of not very structured speech. Nobody likes that. It's not very helpful. So I think that's about it. These are the exercises that I wanted to share. And to wrap it up, to summarize what we're talking about today, confidence in presentations comes from competence. In order to develop this competence, you need to work on your own. It's not something that somebody can teach you. Confidence always comes from competence, and you are the only person who is responsible for building that positive experience for yourself. Nobody can tell these stories for you. Nobody can watch these videos with 79 questions for you. Nobody can select the 5 questions you want to answer for you, and nobody can write down a clear message for you. It is absolutely worthwhile to work in a group and to work with a coach if you want professional, high-quality feedback, but nobody can do this work for you. You got to do this on your own, and you got to listen to yourself and hear yourself and understand how you actually sound when you talk to people. And when you receive feedback, this will only reinforce your own experience, and this will confirm your own findings. And the findings can be positive or negative. It might confirm your idea that you need to improve your diction and your pronunciation, or it might confirm the idea that you're not ready for interruptions. So this is what you want to work on, right? Especially that person who was asking that question, what do I do when somebody interrupts me in the middle of my talk? Or what do I do if I'm out of words? What do I do if I've forgotten what I wanted to say? Practice exactly that. You want to feel very comfortable and very confident in spontaneous conversations. Okay, that's it for today. That's my message. And if you guys want to join the course, which is in Moscow, we're starting on March 22nd. If you have questions about public speaking skills or presentation skills, write me a comment below and I'll make sure to reply.